Alright, I think I've kept you guys on edge long enough, so without further ado, this is going to be a video of the new mystery garden tractor that I picked up. One of my most prized possessions, I think, and one that was actually on my bucket list, and I just happened to be fortunate enough to acquire this one recently. I know I've kept you guys waiting, and to give you a little bit of background, I was not expecting to purchase this machine at all, but sometimes when the right deal comes up, you just have to jump on it, and this is a machine that you don't see any of, well, this particular version of it, I should say, and a friend of mine sent me the link to this machine for sale on Facebook Marketplace and said, found a unicorn, and I looked it over, and sure enough, there it was, and I immediately decided that I had to have it because the chances of me finding another one of these are going to be next to impossible. So, what did I buy? As you can tell by my shop situation here, I've got some space to tinker with tractors, but as far as storage goes, I really don't have a whole lot of space to store rare or valuable machines that will probably just sit most of the year except for shows. So I'm not really interested in buying like uber rare machines that are like one-offs or things like that, especially obscure brands like ones that have since been discontinued and whatnot. So for the sake of serviceability and parts and just basic knowledge on machines, having to ask people questions about them and fixing them, I tried to stick with something that I'm fairly familiar with, or at least a brand that I'm familiar with. So hopefully that narrows things down a little bit for you. So the first little hint I'll give you here this did not come with the machine, but I purchased it specifically for this machine. If you look closely, you may be able to tell that this is a 3-point hitch for a Cub Cadet. So the rare tractor I bought is a Cub Cadet. You're probably wondering what model it is. I can tell you right off the bat, it's not an 800, it's not a 169. Heck, it's not even an original with the M&W 9-speed, which is pretty uber rare, I guess you could say. There's very few of those in existence. The machine I picked up happens to be rarer than all three of those, and it's kind of lesser known, I should say, that these even exist. Mostly because when you first look at them, you'd have no idea. So, I bought a 2072. I know what you're probably thinking, oh, these things are all over the place, everybody and their brother's got one, what's so special about this? Well, let's take a little bit of a deeper look. The first thing I'll point out is the serial number and the manufacture date. So if you look at the manufacture date, you'll notice that it was built January 23rd, 1987, which marked the very beginning of the, I guess you could say, the 72 series generation of these the 82 series. So this tractor was built at the very start of the 2072 production. So this is actually one of the very first 2072s built. Another thing I'd like to mention is the model number code. You will see there that the model number code is 147731-100. To an untrained eye, it probably doesn't mean anything to you, but I'll touch back on that in a little bit. So keep that in mind. If we come around to the front here, you'll notice it has dual mufflers, whereas a traditional 2072, or the more commonly seen 2072s, have a single outlet exiting right here. And if you look closely, you may recognize this as a similar setup to what would be in the 982, or in the case of my custom-built 782. You can see I'm running the same dual muffler setup there with the same PTO and everything, or similar PTO, I should say. So, hopefully that gives you another hint. If we open the hood, you will see that this tractor does not have the typical Kohler Magnum 20-horse engine. It has an Onan B48G, which is the same engine used in the Cub Cadet 982s, as well as the 1912 and the 1914 model. So this is a factory Onan-powered Cub Cadet 2072. A lot of people don't actually know that these tractors even exist, and that's because, well, simply put, there were hardly any of these made. In reading through some forums and having some exchanges, some conversations with former Cub Cadet employees who worked at the Brownsville, Tennessee factory around the time these were built, it's confirmed that less than 100 of these Onan-powered 2072s were ever built. The exact number is believed to be 83. I mentioned that this tractor was built in January of '87. Presumably most of the parts were assembled in 1986, or made in 1986, I should say. And this being one of the very early 2072s was one of the tractors to receive a factory Onan engine instead of a Kohler. And the reason for that was because at the time the 982 had already been discontinued. It had been replaced by the 1912 and 1914, which were kind of oddballs. You don't see a whole lot of those because they were only made 1 or 2 years. Basically the same thing as a 982, though, just the first white and yellow version, and after the 982 was discontinued. And in January of '87, the 72 series were released, which were basically just an update to all of the models in the lineup. And at the time, Cub Cadet had a bunch of Onan B48G engines left over from the 1912 and 1914 production. And it was decided that rather than eat the cost of all those engines and just let them collect dust, they would install them in these tractors before switching over to the Kohler Magnum 20, which they already had a bunch of those engines on order to go in, but they figured they would use up the rest of the Onan engines first. And the general, like I said, the overall number of these that were rumored to be built has been established as 83. Which is, less than 100, far fewer than the number of originals that have been converted to the M&W aftermarket 9-speed. Those are believed to be the holy grail, the rarest of all the Cub Cadets. As far as the International Harvester built Cub Cadets go, that's just about as rare as you can get. I think the propane-powered 147s are the only one that beat that. And actually, come to think of it, maybe the only model that beats this in terms of number built. But as far as Cub Cadets in general go, this is counting IH and the CCC built models. These 2072s are believed to be the rarest model produced with the Onan engine, of course. The regular 2072s with the Kohler engines are, as common as water. But I am kind of proud to have this. It came up for sale on Facebook Marketplace, like I mentioned, and it was up in northern New Jersey, of all places. This is one of the only deals that I have picked up in New Jersey, because most of my tractors have had to come from out of state. So I made the trip up one Saturday morning to pick it up. And this was not too long after I had purchased my first 2072, which was a 1989 model with the Kohler Magnum engine. I touched on that in a previous video. That was a good little tractor in the short time I had it, until it decided to blow the main crank seal out at a plow day, and it started pissing oil everywhere. And around the time I was planning to get the parts to fix it up, I came across this. My friend Jeff sent me the link to this one for sale on Marketplace, and I just decided it would be in my best interest to sell the other 2072 instead of going to the trouble to pull the engine out and get it all fixed up. Because truthfully, knowing my history with the horizontal Kohler opposed twin engines, I'd rather have an Onan. They seem to just run better for me. I don't know why, but they just do. So needless to say, I dropped everything. I sold the old 2072 to my buddy Levi, and then I went and picked this up. So it was quite an interesting series of events leading to this. Now, I mentioned a little while ago the serial or the model code on the serial number tag. You will see that it says 147731100. The difference between this and a traditional serial number tag is that a Kohler-powered 2072 would say 147730100, at least for a 1987 model, because the first 3 digits designate the year. So an 87 2072 with the Kohler engine would be 147730100. The 731 model number was only given to these very early units that had the Onan engine, and like I said, it's confirmed that there were 83 of these built in a time period when Cub Cadet was literally just slapping together whatever tractors they could. I've even been told from a former factory employee that could have meant putting a blue wire in place of a red one. They were just kind of, at the time of the model changeover, they were trying to just put together whatever they could and get them out the door. Of course, I mean, I know it's probably not as exciting as a 169 or an 800, but to me, I think this is pretty cool because if you know me, you know that I'm an own an engine nut. I mean, take a look at that. That pretty much confirms it. As if putting an own an engine in my 782 wasn't already crazy enough. So like I said, it's probably not as special to some people as it is to me, but to be able to say that I own one of these is pretty cool because I really never thought I was going to find one. And you just got to, look for the deals and be in the right place at the right time. I only know of one other own and powered 2072, or well, I guess what's left of it now. On a Facebook group, a member has one that he parted out. I think it's just a roller now, if not just a frame. But as far as these go, I don't know of any other units that are still in service. I mean, I'm sure there's a few out there still. There's probably a handful still running the Onan engines, but they have yet to be discovered. And I discussed with a couple members on the group, and they seem to believe that out of the 83 that originally left the factory with an Onan engine, less than 50 of them have kept their original engine. The rest have all been repowered or junked. So the exact number of these that are still running their original engine is unknown. But with the Onan engine, of course, you have the different muffler setup like I showed earlier, the different shrouding. The throttle cable is different. The throttle cable is slightly longer for the Onan engine. The drive shaft is a different length because the flywheel has a different protrusion than on the Kohler, and the height is a little bit different, so the engine pan bolts directly to the mounting cradle instead of using spacers like the Kohler engines did. These are all things that I had to take into account when I owned and swapped the 782 over there. You can see this has the original mufflers in it still, and they're both pristine. I mean, not even rotted out or anything. And these are getting hard to find. When I did the own and swap in the 782, excuse me, I had to buy a set of new old stock 982 mufflers, which were probably the most expensive part on the whole tractor. You just can't find them anymore. And it's kind of a unique setup, but it gives the engine a great sound. So, like I said, there are a couple of oddball differences that set this apart. Another thing I think I ought to mention is you will notice it has that D-shaped hole there in the tunnel cover that is actually factory. And if you look close, you'll notice that there are two PTO switches on this tractor. A typical 82 series Cub Cadet would have this switch here for your front PTO. And then the Supers also, some of the Supers also came with this directional PTO switch here. And what this switch does is it controls the direction of, it controls which PTO clutch you engage. So now, obviously, this unit does not have a rear PTO, but if it did have a rear PTO, then it would have a third switch installed right there in the tunnel cover, which is kind of an odd location. I have seen a couple of 982s that have a switch there, and they also have a separate decal that goes up in this area here that explains how to use them. Of course, the 3-switch setup was not very popular, and after long enough, Cub Cadet did away with it and went to something a little simpler. But the idea is that to start the tractor, both of these switches have to be in the down position, and then if you have the rear PTO switch, that would also have to be in the down position. If you want to start your rear PTO, you have to flip this switch down and then flip this switch up. If you want to start the front PTO, you have to make sure this switch is flipped down to the off position. You flip this switch up, and then you flip the front PTO switch up. So you can see how that could get kind of confusing or annoying after long enough. So just another neat little defining feature about this model. Most of the Supers you see from this generation do not have this hole here, but the early ones do, and some of the late 982s I've seen have this as well. The 982, 1912, and 1914. So that's just another neat little defining feature. And what's interesting, another interesting little tidbit, is that I got this tractor from the second owner who had all of the original sales invoice papers and the original manuals with it as well. And what's funny is that the manual that came with this tractor from the dealership was actually a manual for a 1914. It wasn't even for a 2072. A lot of people will tell you, or at least the people who know about these Onan powered models will say that there is no literature for these Onan 2072s, and that's kind of partially true. I have seen some wiring schematics and a couple of sales brochures over the years, and like sales flyers from local dealerships that mention an own powered 2072, or just have it listed as having an Onan engine, but those are few and far in between. There's only a handful of pieces of literature out there like that. And of course, you know, you go to a show and the typical collector or Cub Cadet enthusiast will try and tell you that there's no the 2072s never had Onan engines, especially the Cub Cadet dealers. I mean, don't even get me started on them. But that's beside the point. So I just thought that was interesting. The manuals came with it, and the manuals for a 1914 or a late 982, the very late CCC built ones. But that was kind of cool to be able to get all the original paperwork with this tractor. And the story goes that it came from a used car dealership up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I think they used it to plow their driveway and do a little bit of mowing over the years, but it was a pretty small property. So the tractor came with a 54-inch Hay-Band hydraulic angle snow blade, which I have since sold because those are a very heavy and bulky attachment. And I already have this 43 blade on the 318, and the Hay-Band blades are kind of cumbersome to install and to remove, and especially to store. And given my space constraints, I would prefer not to have that giant blade sitting around, so I sold that. And the tractor also came with a 60-inch Hay-Band heavy-duty mower deck, which is a commercial deck. The things are massive, very heavy built. I ended up selling that deck as well. That, according to the sales invoice, this tractor was sold brand new with that deck, so it kind of paid me to separate them, but I made sure the deck went to a good home. My buddy Mikey, who actually bought my 882, bought it to go on his 1782. So at least I know it's in good hands. And I sold that deck because I kept the 50-inch deck from my old 2072, the 89 model. And I figure those cut a little bit nicer. They're a little easier to store. And they're also interchangeable with the smaller 82 series, the non-supers. All you have to do is change the belt and change the mule drive and undercarriage assembly. So if I wanted to, I could throw the deck on the 782 as well. So I sold the 60-inch deck and the 54-inch blade and turned them into cash and freed up a little bit of extra space. And I'm still debating whether I want to sell the wheel weights or not. I've never been a fan of these plastic wheel weights, but at the time, these were the factory or dealer installed option for these tractors by MTD or CCC. So they are technically factory correct. They don't look the best in my opinion, and of course being plastic concrete filled, they're not very durable, but I think for now I'm going to just try and keep them on the machine and keep them in good shape. We'll see what I end up doing with that down the road, but I may end up at least taking them off if nothing else, because I do kind of want to see that white paint underneath. I think that would look pretty good. So I don't know, we'll see, but the previous owner took really good care of this machine. He replaced the hood decals with the correct, not the crappy ones with the off blue. He replaced them with the correct decals. It was common for these later 82 series models for the hood decals to peel off. And another thing you see on these is the Cub Cadet badge breaks off and some of the letters remain. The Cub Cadet badges on this one are both intact and looking really good. And you can see where they touched up some paint in a couple spots. I kind of wish they had left it original because I like the patinaed look, but I'm not complaining. He also replaced the seat with what's supposedly the correct OEM seat, but it has the wrong cushion pattern, so I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that yet or not. And he put a new ignition switch in it. It's got the original padded Cub Cadet key. But it's only a 3-position switch, so there's no way to turn the headlights on. He said that they work, so I took his word, but I am going to replace that with the correct 4-way switch. So that's all to come. It just needs little things, but we'll get there. Enough talking. We'll get this thing fired up here. I'll show you how easy this thing starts. Usually doesn't even need to choke, just a little bit of throttle. Oop. Might need it this time. Huh, guess I gotta eat my words. Usually this thing starts right up as soon as you touch the key, but I think the starter's getting a little weak because you can hear it hesitates before the engine turns over. Let's get her outside here so I don't gas myself out. That rattling noise you hear is that counterweight disc on the PTO clutch rattling. I gotta tighten that up. It's not supposed to flop around like that. But I'll tell you what, guys, this has to be one of the nicest running Onan engines I've ever had, and I've had a lot of them. This one is smooth as a Swiss watch. Doesn't skip a beat. I think the previous owner may have had the intake and the carburetor apart and resealed them, or rebuilt the carb. I'm not 100% sure, but that's my guess. The engine does need a good cleaning. I have to actually take the whole tractor apart and really go over it with a fine-tooth comb. I'm going to do that here pretty soon. Of course, being a 35-year-old tractor, it is going to need some work. I mean, the engine probably needs to be pulled out and resealed and just gone over with new gaskets and things like that. Check it for leaks, make any little fine adjustments it needs, but with the hours it has, you know, 1,042 hours, this thing is tight. Pretty much the definition of a peach. And they took good care of it. Like I said, you can see where the paint's been touched up, but it doesn't bother me too bad. I've seen some pretty bad touch-up jobs before myself. And another nice little defining, or well, not a defining feature, but a nice selling point about this tractor is that the previous owner even installed the Extreme Motorworks torque arms or axle braces. Common problem with these Cub Cadet Supers is when the frames flex, they actually crack the aluminum axle housings. Very common with these later aluminum rears and some of the late cast iron ones that had the aluminum axle tubes as well. They break the tubes up in here along the mounting bolts. So the previous owner installed those Extreme Motorworks braces, and I double checked the torque on the bolts, and they should be good to go. They should never have to worry about those breaking. So I'm really glad, I was really excited to see that he did that, because that showed me that he took good care of this machine. So when I get some time here soon, I'm going to put that 3-point hitch on, and I have to grab a couple last parts for it, some of the lower mounting hardware and some extra bolts, but that'll be going on here soon. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use this as a plow day tractor. I mean, down the road I probably will, but I want to just kind of, you know, take in this machine for what it is and just appreciate having it before I really get it dirty, because this thing is clean and this thing is just right. Somebody took really good care of this thing. See, a lot of the surviving Cub Cadets with Onan engines, you don't see a whole lot that still, you know, are in really good running condition, and somebody took great care of this one. No smoke, no knocks. It's got a couple little leaks, which, like I said, are probably to be expected for the age of the machine, but as far as, you know, Super Cub Cadets go, it's hard to find them in nicer condition than this. And I was kind of jumping back and forth about whether I wanted a 982 or I wanted to save up and buy a diesel like a 1772. But I think this will do. Unless hell freezes over, I have no plans of getting rid of this one, because, like I said, the chances of me finding another one like this are next to none. One of only 83 built and one of supposedly less than 50 still running the original Onan engine. So it's different than your run-of-the-mill 2072. It's even got the original S-pattern Goodyear tires that almost look new. You can still see the little lines in them. So those are, in my opinion, one of the better turf tires that were made back in the day. You see it's got a little bit of creep. I have to adjust that, but it's no big deal. But she runs like a top. skip a beat. And an interesting thing to note about this is that for whatever reason, Cub Cadet govern these engines at 3,600 RPM wide open, whereas John Deere govern them at 3,450. So this one does rev a little bit higher than the one in the 318. I just thought that was kind of interesting. For whatever reason, Deere figured that the higher RPM wasn't necessary. But I just thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, this thing is right, and this thing runs strong. So, like I said, I was thinking about getting a 982, but now I've got something even better. A 982 with power steering. So, I'm not complaining. Let's take her for a quick spin up and down the driveway here. As you can probably imagine, it kind of just feels like the 782 on steroids. Tells you don't need a super garden tractor for a quarter-acre property, get rid of them. You don't need that kind of negativity in your life. She gets up and goes. I'd say it's geared all right for not having a 2-speed rear. That's one of the things Deere had over Cub Cadet with these supers, but it's not like I had the space to go to fly around in high range anyway, so. The steering might need to be tightened up just a little bit because sometimes it will wander, but easy adjustment. The split brakes work okay. Not quite as good as a Deere, but it's, you know, drum brakes versus disc brakes, so I don't know what you'd expect. Pedal sticks a little too. I think the return spring needs to be replaced, but someday I'll get a set of dual brake pedals on the 782. Someday. I'm really stretching my time with this video, so I'm going to try and end it here if I can. So, it's probably not what you guys all expected to see, but these two have an interesting place in Cub Cadet history, and I am proud to be able to own this one. That kind of satisfies my thirst for a super garden tractor, and a Cub Cadet super garden tractor at that. So, what's the plan for this machine? At the moment, nothing. Eventually I will go over it and I will put the 3-point hitch on it, but for right now, I'm just kind of using it as a butt buggy. I think I might take this up the street tonight and get something to eat with it, so I don't know, we'll see. Out here in this area, you can actually do that, and you don't get a bunch of people looking at you funny. It's perfectly okay. So this will be a project for the future, but I'll make videos on that, of course. And figure this will hold you guys off for a while. So the cat has been let out of the bag. I am now the owner of a Cub Cadet 2072 with a factory owned engine. So as always, if you like the video, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate the continued support, and I can't wait to see what kind of things I get into with this machine.